Arthur Nersesian is a prolific novelist of stories set on the Lower East Side. His most recent books are The Sacrificial Circumcision of the Bronx and The Swing Voter of Staten Island, both from the Robert Moses cycle. Please welcome Arthur Nersesian.
I was having such fun listening. Name this land for America. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Let's see. Glasses, script. All right. Knee deep in the espresso. The 60s in the village was now, baby, now, and the spies are everywhere. I spent my time at the coffeehouses in Greenwich Village, and by the end of the night, I'd always end up at the Finjan. The Cafe Finjan was an Israeli coffee house started by a Jewish-American guy who drove a cab, and his parents owned a swank stationery store on the Upper East Side. This was Manny Dorman. If you stayed late enough at the Finjan, and we all did, the Greek musicians would come in after they finished working at the belly dancing joints uptown. There was a run of Greek-owned belly dancing joints on 8th Avenue in the 20s. The musicians would come down to the Finjan because they could get the food they liked there, and they would get their espresso, and they'd come in and they'd end up playing music. There was one song we all had fun with, a Greek song called How Ya Been. We sang along, and we kid around with it, where our understanding left off. We'd sing, How ya been, I am fine, how are you, that's nice, boom, 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 boom. Manny loved the music, and he taught himself how to play the bouzouki until he was good as any of the musicians. His arm got very strong because he was always carrying the bouzouki around, and he'd go around asking people to arm wrestle. He was small and thin, but he could beat anyone at arm wrestling. The Limelight was a coffee house diagonally across from the Finjan, 7th Avenue, just south of Bleecker, and it was lit entirely by candlelight. It was a huge room filled with tables. I remember when Ed Koch was a district politician, he'd hold political meetings in the back of the Limelight, while I was up front having coffee. The Figueroa was run by a fellow who loved Charlie Chaplin movies and showed them in the back room. Politicians who were trying to get attuned to the neighborhood were at the Figueroa, and reporters from the Village Voice. Mary, from Peter, Paul, and Mary, was a waitress there, and her slip was always showing. At the Commons, the owner kept a shotgun under the espresso bar, and he could usually find Taylor Mead there with his portable radio in tow. I think he's here now a lot, right?
Every Monday at 6:30.
Big for an ad. Okay, there you go. Renzi's was another cafe nearby that was overrun by tourists by then. I spent most time at the Finjan. My friends at the Finjan would give me bohemian advice about women. Now, Rich, when a bitch says she's a bitch and she says, man, I am a bitch, believe her, Richie, believe her. Or, women need attention. Negative, positive, they must get attention. Those are from Tom the Greek, and here's one from Jersey Joe. If nothing is going wrong, women will make a drama. Tom the Greek was a Greek-American fella who was always making sketches on newspaper at the cafe, not on blank pages, but on the pages of the printed newspaper. He would tell me these stories. He'd dramatize everything. He'd tell me in a whisper. So I'd drop her off at her apartment, and I waited for her light to come on. And I'm waiting in a car across the street, and then another man goes into her building, and soon the light goes on. Everything was a conspiracy for Tom the Greek. Jersey Joe was a bohemian of a certain type. He was a bohemian by default, because he didn't work. He gambled, he passed bad checks, he bet the racetracks, but mostly he shoplifted. He knew all the shoplifters in those days. It was easier without all the electronic security. He knew all the senior citizen shoplifters who'd been in and out, as they say. When you go stealing at Macy's, there was a diner nearby where all the Macy's shoplifters hung out. They sat in the same section of the diner and compared notes. I heard there was a different section for racetrack gamblers. Jersey Joe had all these ditties. If you got no dough, it's a go, go, go. It's a go, go, go if you got no dough. Naturally, he was separated from his wife. Igor was a character straight out of the movies. He was a mystery man, spoke perfect English with a Hollywood Russian accent, and had a story about getting into America by way of defecting from the Russian army after almost dying in China and being asked to translate Russian for the American Air Force in Japan. At the time, I took his word for it, but looking back, God only knows who he really was. He insisted that his name was pronounced Igor. He always carried a pint of 100 proof vodka in his inside pocket, and he drank it straight. When he came into the coffee house, we would all look and announce in an exaggerated accent, Igor! The NYU kids ate it right up. This was around 1963-64, so he did very well. He hung signs for instructions in Russian, and these students who would call themselves communists would pay for private lessons. Shel Silverstein was another regular at the Fiend John. He was into his cartoons and his songwriting already, but I knew him as just another guy at the coffee house. Everyone did something creative. I was into drawing in those days, but most people related on another level first. I think people were able to make friends in that atmosphere because we had all been through the same things, the Depression and then the war. A lot of guys had been in the army. To my eye, the creativity came out of this relaxed atmosphere because people wanted to make each other laugh after so much hardship. And there wasn't so much pressure from the upper echelons to make money. People didn't make art or songs for what it would get them, but to make each other laugh or for just the fun of doing it. Anyhow, Shel was a pal of mine. We told stories about our childhood, and I sang him a song my mother taught me from back in her day. Who's taking care of the caretaker's daughter while the caretaker is taking care. Shel made it into a folk song he sang in Chicago. Who's going round with the astronaut's daughter while the astronaut's going round. Hate those guys. There were all these characters. Tom Ely was a fellow who knew everything about Civil War uniforms. He was always drawing them. He could tell you what each uniform meant or who was in what battalion. One guy, I forget his name, after the Ted Kennedy scandal, he went around the village saying, Chappaquiddick, Chappaquiddick, over and over as if it were a bird call. Chappaquiddick. Another fella dubbed himself Rexall, his village name, because he hung out at the lunch counter at Rexall's drugstore, and because he was doing drugs in the shooting galleries on the east side. After a while, it got shortened to just Rex. A lot of people had village names. In my crowd, there were a lot of Richards, so everyone had a different moniker. There was Uptown Richard, who lived in the East 80s. There was MG Richard, who drove a red MG. Father Richard, because he reminded someone of a priest. I was just Richie. Maybe because I was on the younger end of things. I didn't really like it, but usually you were stuck with your village name. There was a lot of distinct individuality. You can be with a lot of bohemian types, and they may be selfish, or their heads aren't screwed on too tight, but they're still individualistic in their approach to their own lives. And there they were. And I was absorbing everything. I was like a sitter on the sidelines. They didn't know what to consider me, whether I was square, which was a very derogatory term in the 60s, or what. But there I was, knee-deep in the Espresso. From what I can see, I think that self has gone underground in recent